Today we're going to talk about a lease and purchase of a vehicle, or sometimes it's called a buyout of a lease. At the end of leasing a vehicle, you have some options that might be financially advantageous to you. You can make a profit at the end of a lease. And we'll talk about how that works, what the paperwork is, and how you can make sure the dealer or the manufacturer doesn't steal the equity in your vehicle. If you have a vehicle you've leased for 3 or 4 years, you likely have built up equity or profit in that vehicle that rightfully belongs to you. You should do it with you please. And you want to make sure that you don't get equity stripped or value stripped by an unscrupulous dealer or manufacturer on a vehicle that you have value in. So let's take a look at how that works. Over the past 7 to 8 years, vehicle leasing has been much more popular than it has been in previous years. More manufacturers were pushing lease options versus financing to new car buyers. And the reason is twofold. Number one, it keeps buyers within brand loyalty. At the end of your lease, they try to flip you into another lease on the same brand car. The other reason is it allows a manufacturer to offer a lower payment on a vehicle, lower monthly payment to a buyer, because you don't own the vehicle. You're just basically renting it or leasing the part that you're using for the next 3 or 4 years. They also are able to provide additional incentives or rebates into a vehicle transaction without making it look cheap. Here's the thing. If you walked into a dealership and they offered you a $2,000 rebate, that might sound good, but you might be thinking, well, why do they have a rebate on this vehicle? It's like a circus act or carnival discount on a vehicle. It doesn't make the vehicle process seem that professional or formal or dignified. That's why you don't see dealerships with big rebate signs in their windows anymore. They want to make the purchase process seem more upstanding. But when they do want to discount a vehicle, they can put that discount built into the lease value without making it seem like they're doing bargain basement. So they like leasing. The way a lease works is you are only paying for the amount of the vehicle you use. For example, if you buy a $30,000 vehicle and you keep it for 3 years, and during that 3 years the value goes down from, let's say, $30,000 to $20,000, well, you've only used $10,000 of the value. So what they do is they say, well, we estimate your vehicle is going to depreciate $10,000 for the next 2 years, 3 years, and you just pay us that, and at the end of the lease, you give us the vehicle back. That'll be you paying for the rest of the vehicle. And what the lease companies did for many years was they artificially inflated the lease end values because that was their way of discounting cars for customers. So if they thought the car was going to be worth $20,000, they might say, well, we're going to say it's worth $22,000, so you only have to pay $8,000 for the depreciated amount, right? And at the end of the lease, you turn it in, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with them giving you an inflated value because you don't have to pay it, and it actually helps lower your payments. But most of the time, the buyout option that you had was much higher than the book value of the car, so it wasn't worth buying the car out. However, in the last 2 or 3 years, really the last year and a half especially, used car values have skyrocketed. You've seen it in the news. You've seen it in our videos. In fact, there are some vehicles that are 2 years old with low miles that are worth more today than they were brand new. We see vehicles selling on dealers' lots that are 2 years old, 25,000 miles, and the asking price is higher than the original window sticker price for the vehicle. We see it all the time. You've seen us feature that in other videos. How does that benefit you if you are a lease holder, a lessee? Well, every lease has a clause in the lease that at the end of the term, you can buy out the vehicle. And it's a price that's set in stone when you buy the vehicle. So if you purchase a vehicle that's $30,000, using our example, you have a lease buyout of $20,000 in 3 years. At the end of the lease, you have 3 options. You can just bring the car to the dealership, drop off the keys, and walk away. That's a lease turn-in. You can trade it in for a new vehicle at the dealership. It's a lease trade-in. Or you can buy out the vehicle, exercise your option, pay the $20,000, and you keep the vehicle. And many times people want to do that because a lease-end vehicle is a good quality used car because, number one, you know the prior history of the car. You don't have to look it up on Carfax. You know about that car more than anybody. You know how it was maintained. You know how it was driven. You know how good it is. You know how much you like it or not. So you can buy that car for whatever the lease end value is. You have that right. It's in your contract. It's irrevocable. You have the right to buy it for that, let's say, $20,000. Well, in the past, if you didn't want to buy the vehicle for $20,000, for example, you just tossed the keys on the desk and you walked away. Let them deal with it. However, if you were going to not want to keep the vehicle today and you just flip the keys to the dealership used car department, you might be missing out on some equity because what if that vehicle is worth $25,000 and you just give it to them? Well, what they will do is they will buy out your vehicle for that $20,000 equity. And now they just bought a $25,000 vehicle for $20,000. You gave them $5,000 bulk gift to a car dealership. You probably didn't want to do that, but you probably didn't know you're doing that. So instead of just doing a lease turn-in or trade-in, look at what your lease buyout option is. Take your contract out. You'll have what's called a residual value or a buyout value. That's what it's called on your lease contract. Look up what that amount is. Find it in your contract. Once you find that, then start to figure out what your vehicle's worth. And there's a few ways to do that. You can plug it into some valuation guides online. You can look at what cars are selling for, similar to yours. And you get an idea of what your equity might be. Even if you don't want to keep your vehicle, you're entitled to that equity. It's yours. Don't give it away to anybody. Because if you simply turn the car into a dealership and walk away, you don't get the equity. In fact, even if you go to that dealership and you buy another car, unless you pay very close attention, they might swallow up that equity and not put it towards your new car. They might consider it 2 transactions. One is lease turn-in, walk away from your car. The other is buy a new car. They might call it trade-in, but they might not be giving you credit for your car because they want to keep that $5,000 for themselves as a used car profit. So you want to make sure that that valuable equity isn't stripped away from you if, in fact, it exists, which it probably does. Any lease turn-ins that are happening between the middle to end of 2021 and 2022 and probably into 2023 are going to have some type of lease and equity. And you want to make sure you get what's coming to you. So the other option is, what if you don't want to keep the vehicle? You don't want to buy another vehicle, but you want your equity. Well, then what you do is you sell it to somebody else and pocket the difference. That could be a little tricky, but if it's $5,000 or $6,000, it's going to be worth it. Even if it takes you, 10 or 20 hours of your time for $5,000, think about how much you have to work at your primary job to make $5,000. So prepare for that. You may have to do it through the dealership. Some lease contracts require that if you're not buying out your vehicle, you have to offer it to the dealership. That might get a little tricky. It might require some negotiation. But you want to make sure you know what all the options are. For example, here is a printout from the official laws of the state of California, issued by the DMV in California to dealers, transfer of a vehicle by a lessee to a lessor as a sale for resale. Sounds kind of complicated, but this is what we're talking about. The sale of a vehicle by a lessee or to a lessee by a lessor may be considered a non-taxable sale for resale if the lessee, meaning you, transfers title and registration to a third party within 10 days. The sale will be presumed to be a sale for resale. So what does that mean? If you, the lessee, at the end of your lease, find a buyer and you transfer that title to a third party to that buyer, you don't have to pay tax on your purchase amount. Has to be within 10 days. The sale is presumed to be for resale. Why is that important? Well, your lease end buyout probably is a sales taxable event if you were going to keep it. If you have a $20,000 vehicle and at the end of your, or you have a $20,000 lease buyout, at the end of your lease you pay $20,000 and your state charges you 6% tax, you would have to pay $1,200 in taxes to buy that vehicle. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, if you buy a vehicle for $20,000, you have to pay tax. But what if you're just taking it at the end of the lease and flipping it to a third party, like the article says, the document says? Technically, if it wasn't for this clause, you would have to pay $1,200 tax, and then 10 days later, the new buyer that you sold it to would have to pay tax on whatever you sold it to them for. If you sold it to them for $25,000, they would have to pay $1,500 in tax. So they would get taxed twice, double dip for the state. So most states have an exemption of tax for you as a lease end buyer if you're selling it to a third party, even if it goes through the dealership, even if the dealership has to be part of it. What do the lease companies require at the end of a lease? Well, here is a printout from GMAC, how to get a title for your lease vehicle. When a lease vehicle is paid off, meaning that at the end of the lease you own it, the payoff party must provide all the following to get a title: the odometer statement showing how many miles are on it, title release instructions, where do we send the title to, and a damage disclosure form. Some states require this. It lists 4 states. There's a few more that have this now. But if you send those things to the leaseholder, the payoff party, then they'll send you a title. It's pretty straightforward. And there's certain forms you need for that. They'll run through all the forms for you. This is GM Financial, and they tell you where to send it to, their treasury operations, Arlington, Texas. If you notice, at the bottom it says customers located in these states, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, can't purchase their vehicle directly from GM Financial. Residents will need to visit a GM dealership to purchase. Again, sometimes it's required that the dealership has to be involved. Even if it's not in the statutes, the reason for it is in these states, GM Financial is not recognized as a licensed dealer. They can't sell cars. They're a bank. They don't have an exemption as a dealer to sell cars. So you have to do it through a GM dealer. Some lease companies, we've heard this with Toyota and with Honda, in their lease contract, it says, doesn't matter where you live, if you are going to buy out your vehicle, you have to go to the dealer. If you're going to resell your vehicle, you have to go back to the dealer. And in those cases, you want to make sure you're adamant. I want my equity. Don't steal my equity. Because in reality, if you have equity in a vehicle and you just turn it into the dealership and they don't give you your built up equity, then it's like stealing. So you want to make sure you know about it, because if you never knew about it, you wouldn't have any recourse. You wouldn't be able to prevent it from happening. So a lease end value compared to the market value is extremely important. Get a few bids on your vehicle. Find out who's willing to buy it. I can tell you right now, every single new car dealer in the country is desperate for used car inventory. They're starving for good quality used cars on their lot. Don't take my word for it. Prove it to yourself. Next time you drive by where the dealerships are in your town, there's always an area where all the dealerships are. Look at their used car lots. See how empty they are. They might arrange the cars to make it look like it's full, like spread them out or put them on an angle or do something weird with the inventory. But you look and see how many cars are on their lot. They're desperate for used cars. We're seeing this in our title division, where auctions the prices are through the roof, and dealers are just begging for any inventory they can get. So if you just give them your car and your equity without making it a process, you're just handing it to them on a silver platter, a gift. And if you want to give them a gift, that's fine. That's up to you. But I'm sure that you wouldn't do it if you knew that that is what was happening. So you can find a dealership that would want to buy your car, guaranteed. They might want to just tell you, well, you just have to turn it in. No, we can't buy it. They might want to make up some kind of story. But look at your contract. It's not true. You could buy out your vehicle and then sell it to the dealership. If they try to tell you that there's tax on the vehicle you have to pay or reductions or it's not worth it, look it up. Don't take their word for it. Here's a perfect example. In California, it's tax exempt if you sell it to a third party. And that third party could be a dealership or could be a private party buyer. Don't let them tell you otherwise. Even with this statute in California, we've heard a lot of horror stories where the dealership either intentionally or unintentionally misrepresented this to a buyer. And they said, no, you have to pay tax. You have to collect tax. Maybe the dealership didn't know. Maybe they did know and they just wanted to make it hard for the lease end customer. So stick to your guns, stand your ground, get good information, use all your resources, and look at this as a windfall. 3 years ago when you leased your vehicle, you probably didn't expect to have anything at the end of the lease. That's good. This is a bonus. This is like you finding $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 sitting on the ground somewhere that you get to keep. Don't let the wind blow it away and let a dealership keep it. More resources on our website, but make sure that your lease end buyout is handled properly. Whether you sell the car to a third party, you keep it, or you use your equity towards a new vehicle, which is fine. Just make sure it's properly applied to your new vehicle. Find it on the contract. If you have $5,000 in equity, you make that dealership show you where it is on your new vehicle purchase contract. Where's my equity? If it's not there, they're stealing it.